Hello, and welcome to our web series, Structure of a JIRA Project. And today, we're going to talk about user roles. We're going to talk about user roles and how they work in a company-managed project and how they work in a team-managed project. And hopefully, if you've been paying attention and watching, last episode, I talked about user roles just a little bit. Well, this is where you're going to get all that information and how they work towards your JIRA project. We've talked about issue types, workflows, screens, fields, permissions, and now we're going to talk about user roles. So you'll see here, we're talking about this section right here, roles. You can also get to the same exact section on the left-hand side by selecting people. And as soon as it loads, we'll talk about it. So here is your project role screen. You're going to see here, it looks pretty similar to something that we covered last week on the permissions in the team managed project. And that's on purpose, I believe. I'm hoping. I'm looking at you, Latzian. So here, you're going to see where you can search for a name, a group, or an email address. User roles are really good to use for permission schemes because as a project admin, not a JIRA admin, but as a project admin, they can add users to roles or even groups to a project role, thus making it easier for them to handle the permissions for their project and not always having to rely on a JIRA admin to make the updates to a permission scheme. So this is why it's always very highly recommended, if I would say best practice, to use user roles if possible. And I'm probably going to use the word user role and project roles. To me, they're interchangeable. So if I say that 4 or 5 times, I do apologize, but no, I mean the exact same thing. So here, like I said, you can search for the names, groups, or email addresses. Our list right now is very short. It's just me. You'll see over here on this side, you can also filter down by what roles you want to look at. So if you want to look at who has the administrator's role, developer's role, external, service desk customer, service desk team role, you can do so. And I will add that these roles are not specific. You can have roles that are specific to you and your team and your company. And I'll talk about how to add those here in just a few moments. So how do you add someone to a project role? Pretty simple. You're going to hit add people. We're going to add me because why not? We're going to check the role, and you'll see here in the roles that there are descriptions. Now, these are what the roles are intended to be used for. So when you are using these roles, please try to use it for that. And when you're creating a project role, please make sure you include what that role's intention is for. So those who are using it are knowing exactly what role to give. So that way you're not adding additional permissions to users who don't need those permissions. We're going to add me to this developer's role. I'm going to hit add. It's going to take it a second. It will refresh, and then you'll see that I am now part of 2 roles. Now you can remove a user pretty simply if you select this remove button. And then what happens is that user is then removed from project roles. If you want to remove them from a specific role, if they have multiple, you select this drop down and just uncheck it. Same for if you want to add them to multiple roles. You can also do it this way rather than going through typing their name and selecting the role. Either or can be done. It depends on you and how you want to do it. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about how to add user roles. So what we're going to do here is we're going to type in roles. That's going to go to project roles. Like I said, they're interchangeable. You'll see here, this is going to show you. Now to get to this screen, I will add that you do have to be a JIRA administrator. If you're not a JIRA administrator, then please use whatever your company's policy is to get things added to JIRA if necessary. And what we'll do here, it's going to show you all the project roles, the description, and the actions. You can also manage the default members. So if you have a project role, let's say administrators, and you know that you always want your JIRA admins to be part of the administrator's project role, you can select this and add them in there. And that's pretty easy. You'll see here, we already have it. You can also edit, which would be editing the name, the description, and then you can also delete. Please keep in mind that when you make the delete action, that is removing that project role. So if you have any permission schemes that are referencing that project role, those users that are in that role will no longer have access to the project. So just keep in mind, double check before you delete. How to add a project role. Real simple. We're going to go down here where it says add project role. We're going to type in demo project role, for lack of a better name. And this is for a demo purpose. We're going to select add project role. And now you'll see over here our demo project role. This is for a demo purpose. Is right here. So now when we go to our project, we'll go to that people tab as we spoke about earlier. I can now add demo project role as a role. Now, another thing to keep in mind, just because you add a project role doesn't mean that it's going to grant access, because it does have to be part of a permission scheme to grant that access. So please keep that in mind when you're adding a project role, that just adding it doesn't automatically grant access. Make sure it's part of a permission scheme or a permission setup to gain project access. So that's how user roles work in a company managed project. Now let's go ahead and go over to a team managed project and talk about that. So here we are at the access tab for the team managed project. This looks very similar to what we just looked at for the project roles in the company managed project. And if you watched last episode, you'll see that adding users to a team managed project is very similar to adding users for the user role in a company managed project. So what can be done here to make these roles a little bit different? Well, you can go over here and you can select manage roles. And you'll see here, it's going to tell you what these roles are about. And we did talk about these roles in the previous episode, as these are how you grant permission to the project, which is what differs between a team managed project and a company managed project. When you're adding a user to a role in a team managed project, that means you're giving them access to that project then and there. In a company managed project, make sure it's part of a permission scheme to grant them permission. And you can see here, there's this little plus sign. You could duplicate a role if you want to have a role duplicated. Probably don't want to do that very often, because that could create confusion as to why there's 17 roles that have the exact same permission. Let's see how we can create a role. So in here, we're going to call it the same thing. And we're going to give it a description. As you can see, both of those have an asterisk, so those are both required, because you need to have a description here, so you're letting people know what kind of access you're granting this person to this project. Since I'm the only one here, I know what I'm doing, so I don't need to type that in. And now this is all the things that you can add to that role, and this will grant them permission, which you'll see here, it mentions here in each one of these, the web series team project. It's going to mention whichever project you're in when you're making this update. In here, you can select if you want them to have permission to administer the project. It's going to tell you what that means. Manage the issues, which then is nice, as you can come down here. Maybe you don't want them to be able to delete certain things, but you do want them to be able to add or remove watchers. You can come through and you can select specific items rather than just giving them permission for all. You'll see there's a lot of information there. I encourage you to kind of explore that on your own. You can also see that you can give sprint permission, development tools. If you watched our last episode, you're going to see that a lot of this looks just like the permission scheme in a company managed project, which is basically what you're doing is giving this role those permissions. And it's all pretty much the same. But once again, the nice thing is that you can pick and choose what you want to have them do. You can also just allow create, and then there's collaborating, which is allowing them to add items to the ticket and deleting their own items. So once again, I do encourage you to kind of take a look at these. And then down here, you can assign this role when you're creating it. If you want to assign it to someone immediately, you can do so by typing in the name and hitting create. And you'll see here, there is now that new role. We're going to see if we can get that role added. And you see I'm already on there. We can also remove it. Let's say the role is no longer needed. You'll see here you cannot remove the administrator, member, or viewer role. Those are always going to be here. You can delete any custom created roles, which can be done by the trash can. Once again, it says it here, and I'll say it again. Make sure you're certain that you want to make a deletion before you do, because it may impact their access to getting notifications, accessing the ticket, and being able to work the ticket. And we'll talk about notifications more in the next episode. So as you can see, user roles and project roles are a little bit different in team managed project than they are in a company managed project. They look the same, however, their functions are a little bit different. In the team managed project, your roles are treated directly with the permissions to that project. In your company managed project, your project roles are just there to be able to be used for access using a permission scheme. Two things I want to have you remember. With company managed project, a project admin can make updates to the project roles, which is why it's best practice to use those in a permission scheme. So then that way your project admin can control who does and doesn't have access. And you can use groups with project roles if you want to have automatic removal and adding of users through whatever service you currently use. With team managed projects, when you add a user to a role, that gains them immediate access. So just please keep that in mind that one, it does not mean immediate access in company managed project, but in team managed project, it does. I want to thank you again for joining me today as we went over user roles in both a company managed project and a team managed project. Thank you for watching the structure of a JIRA project, and I'll see you on the next one.